Have you ever thought back to your childhood, back when you were 5 or 6 or 7 years old, and remembered something you loved to do, something you did all the time? Maybe you were always sculpting with Play Doh or constructing with Legos, dressing up dolls or playing tag with your neighborhood friends. For me, my favorite thing to do as a child was load up a game on the family PC. One of my favorites was a game called Putt-Putt Saves the Zoo. It revolved around a purple car, Putt-Putt, and his dog attempting to rescue several baby animals that had gone missing from the zoo in Putt-Putt's town. I remember spending hours playing this game whenever I could because I was enamored by all of the bright colors and popping graphics of the characters and background environments. While doing some reminiscing on Putt-Putt Saves the Zoo recently, I started to wonder, how does this 25-year-old kids game stand up to the test of time? Today, we're going to find out. Putt-Putt's gameplay is bare-bones simple, but its simplicity works to the advantage of trying to appeal to a young audience. The entirety of the game revolves around searching for a certain item or character on the screen and clicking on it or dragging an item to it, a concept even a 3-year-old could eventually figure out. While point-and-click games usually bore me out of my mind due to their repetitive nature, Putt-Putt keeps the player constantly engaged by allowing interaction with almost the entire environment. For example, in this environment alone, the player can interact with the apples, flowers, rocks, tree, fence, and more, and on top of that, the animations played when clicking on a certain part of the environment cycle so that it's not the same animation every time. When the player clicks on the fence, it can either transform into an electric fence or into barbed wire. While this doesn't seem like an important tidbit, many point-and-click games wouldn't even include so many options for interaction in an environment, much less cycle the animations to spice up the experience. Besides these animations, the gameplay of Putt-Putt revolves entirely around fighting items to coax the missing animals back to their original habitats. For example, when trying to save the baby elephant, the player needs to use a bag of food found at the beginning of the game to lure out the mouse, preventing the baby elephant from returning to its exhibit. While this concept usually wouldn't work in a point-and-click game designed for a more advanced audience because it would need to be improved upon, as it's far too simple as is, this style works exceptionally well for younger kids because there's very little to be confused about. Every item is useful, so if a player can't figure out what item to use in a certain situation, theoretically they could click on every item in their inventory and eventually get the answer right. However, even as a young child, this is unlikely because the puzzles are so elementary that it's more difficult to get a puzzle wrong multiple times than figure it out first try. Most puzzles revolve around fitting the right shapes together, like the seal puzzle. To escort the baby seal back to its exhibit, the player must use the right shape of wrench to loosen a lever. As long as the player can recognize the shape of a pentagon, they can finish the puzzle. It could be said that the game is babying the player, but this isn't a problem when the intended audience is practically babies. For this reason, Putt-Putt Saves the Zoo is extremely effective in creating a simple to understand yet enjoyable experience for a young audience, allowing me to give it a 9 out of 10 for gameplay. Even though the gameplay is so simplistic, that's what it's intended to be. If Putt-Putt was trying so much harder to be advanced, it wouldn't work for its intended audience. Putt-Putt's graphics are vibrant and cartoonish, creating a cheerful and inoffensive environment clearly meant for children. These bright colors are most prevalent in the game's background, flourishing with bright greens, light blues, and a shiny tan, which is borderline bright white. Humongous Entertainment then combines these bright colors with exaggerated, cartoonish drawings, especially in their depiction of Putt-Putt. Not only is his puppy, a side character in Putt-Putt Saves the Zoo, absolutely adorable, but Putt-Putt himself sports giant eyes and a huge bright smile, coupled with a striking purple coloring that stands out against the game's greens and tans. Putt-Putt continues its trend of adorable animal characters with the baby animals found throughout the game, managing to make players gush over a baby snake, Little Skeeter of all things. Putt-Putt accomplishes this feat by giving its characters a bright, cheery attitude after being rescued, big smiles plastered on the animals' faces.
Mama! 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 Baby Jumbo's coming home!
It's clear that Humongous Entertainment attempted to make its characters as cutesy and appealing to children as possible, and speaking from personal experience, these designs succeeded. I adored the baby hippo and baby seal when I was younger. On top of Putt-Putt Saves the Zoo's cutesy depictions of the baby animals and Putt-Putt's dog, the artist did an amazing job at creating zany and exaggerated artwork for the background environment and cycling animations. Some of the cycling animations are so wild and unexpected that they border between crazy and downright hilarious. Even as a 17-year-old, I found myself laughing along to a surprising amount of the animations I found scattered throughout the map, especially the monkeys at the gift cart or fish rowing up the main entrance's waterfall. Even when Putt-Putt Saves the Zoo isn't trying to be adorable, its carefree and fun-loving nature spreads throughout the other aspects of the game, creating artwork that's so laughable and fun to look at that I found myself replaying some of the animations dozens of times over. For these reasons, I feel it's completely fair to say that Putt-Putt deserves a 9.5 out of 10 for its graphics. My only problem with them being that during talking animations, the characters often move out of sync with the words they're saying.
Mama! 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 Baby Jumbo's coming home!
However, the game was released almost 25 years ago, and animation back then wasn't nearly as advanced as it is now.
Now, the end of my simple introduction. Put up your fists, you evil crusaders. Let me knock you out.
Therefore, I think it's completely justified to only give it a 0.5 reduction. Another thing to mention in terms of graphics that isn't necessarily a problem with Putt-Putt Saves the Zoo, but more a problem with its Steam port, is that occasionally in the Steam port there will be times where pixels are gone or certain images are artifacted. But this happens rarely, and the only time I really found it was in the scene with Kenya on the waterfall. The sound design of Putt-Putt is a hidden gem. Remember the amount of animations mentioned earlier in the review? Every single one of those animations comes with a sound tailored to it. When games in today's market have the audacity to be released missing sounds, like Ukulele being released without a pause theme,
Where's the pause theme at, huh? How you not gonna have pause music?
it's especially impressive that a game from the 1990s has so many unique in-game sounds. While the actual sounds for these animations can become annoying if repeated, it's up to the discretion of the player whether these animations are repeated in the first place. So in reality, it's the player's fault if the animation sounds become annoying. Besides these sounds, characters in the game have voice lines, obviously. These voice lines perfectly fit the look and personality of each character. Outback Al has an Australian accent because he's from the Outback,
Here you go for a job well done.
whereas the baby elephant has a shakier, more timid voice because he's scared of small things like mice. Characters' voice lines are placed in center stage during cutscenes, which play when Putt-Putt first meets a character and after they help them, in the case of the baby animals. During these cutscenes, characters' voice lines are perfectly crafted to fit the emotions of the characters involved. When first meeting a baby animal, they respond to Putt-Putt timidly, fear evident in their voices.
Hey, to get that mouse to move. Well, hurry as fast as lightning.
However, after rescuing baby animals, they respond with glowing gratitude, happiness evident in their delivery and their animations. Even though speaking with emotion seems like it should be a baseline for voice acting, games today can't get it right sometimes, like the bland delivery of voice lines from the main character in Mass Effect Andromeda. So Putt-Putt's ability to get it right over 20 years ago is that much more notable. Besides Putt-Putt's voice acting, the background music in this game is honestly quite amazing. Each part of the soundtrack is tailored to fit the area you're in, where the jungle blares music containing heavy usage of bongo-sounding drums that remind me of a congo or a safari. Whereas the savannah section of the zoo seems to introduce background music that's closer to the Lion King soundtrack. The soundtrack never feels out of place. It feels like every track is crafted to fit the area it's played in. There's even more urgent, panic-sounding music that starts to play whenever you come across a baby animal that's in trouble. This is most noticeable when attempting to rescue Sammy Seal. However, after rescuing the baby animals, the music picks back up and becomes much more lighthearted, giving the player an audible cue that they did a good job. And I can't forget to mention the song sung by the topiary animals at the entrance to the zoo. This song is an absolute slap, and to be honest, I would put it on my playlist if it was on Spotify.
Welcome to the zoo, with the kangaroos, and the tigers too. Welcome to the zoo.
Younger me felt like I was watching a movie when the cutscenes came on, or the different tracks changed to accommodate the mood of each scene, immersing the player in a much more enjoyable and real atmosphere. The only real issue I have with the sound design in Putt-Putt Saves the Zoo is the cycle-based voice line spoken by the animals. Every parent animal searching for its child reuses the voice line before the player enters a cutscene with them. However, every time you enter the area they're in, they'll say this line. Oftentimes you have to keep coming back to these areas, and the voice lines get annoying very quickly. This prompts me to give Putt-Putt's sound design a 9.5 out of 10, which I think is completely justified because there's really only one issue. Lastly, Putt-Putt's interface is quite basic, but that makes the game much easier to understand for its younger audience. Case in point, all the items the player collects throughout the game are stowed away in Putt-Putt's dashboard, an inventory system that's always present on the screen. Other games usually require a button press to open an inventory, including other point-and-click games. However, to avoid confusion for a younger audience and to avoid the use of a control screen that the younger audience probably wouldn't even understand, Humongous Entertainment just streamlined this process and always kept the inventory on the screen. This is especially helpful for a younger audience because children have short attention spans, and many of the items found in the beginning of Putt-Putt Saves the Zoo aren't used until much later in the game. This can be seen with the hot cocoa and the bag of chips that are picked up from the food cart, which are both used to save baby animals, the baby elephant and the baby snake. Constantly having the inventory looming at the bottom of the screen helps younger kids remember items that they found at the beginning of the game, making puzzles that much easier to solve. Similarly, exiting out of certain sections of the game is made plain and simple to avoid making unwanted decisions. At certain points in Putt-Putt, the player is given the option to branch off into minigames, such as an animal finding game that is mind-numbingly simple. If the player chooses to exit out of these minigames, a window pops up like so. The player is shown 3 different signs to indicate yes or no: green or red, colors usually associated with the check and X, large letters saying yes or no, and a big head nodding or shaking to say yes or no. Such clear indicators just make the experience much easier to understand for kids. Since Humongous understands how to tailor its interface to its audience so well, I feel that Putt-Putt's interface deserves at least an 8.5, maybe even a 9 out of 10. Overall, even though Putt-Putt Saves the Zoo took me less than an hour to complete when I played it recently, I think the bright and cheery atmosphere coupled with the adorable and/or funny graphics and enchanting soundtrack could still continue to reel in children born 25 years after the game's release. It may not be the most advanced or exciting game, but for a game released in 1995, Putt-Putt Saves the Zoo does its job as a short but enjoyable point-and-click game meant for kids surprisingly well. As an overall score, since I gave its gameplay a 9 out of 10, its graphics a 9.5, its sound a 9.5, and its interface a 9, Putt-Putt Saves the Zoo would receive an average score of 9.25 out of 10. Thank you for watching part 1 of 4 of my game review series Childhood Gems. Come back in 2 weeks to see my next review of Bookworm Adventures. You don't want to miss it.